Yes guys, and welcome back to another video. Now today we're going to be talking about buyer's guide for Mark III Golfs. I know I do a lot of Mark III Golf videos because obviously I have one. I've had about 3 now, and so I'm just going to talk about the common problems to look for, and even if you already have one, it's worth just checking these parts on yourself. If you do find these tips useful, make sure you like, share, comment and subscribe, and let's go on with it. So we'll start with bodywork. Obviously these like to rust. Bottom of the arches, make sure you check around the back of these arches. Obviously these are starting to go here, all down the sills. If you do have side skirts, it's worth just feeling underneath. Sometimes it's just worth biting the bullet. You never know what's going to be behind them. Rear arches, they tend to rust as well. It's worth checking inside the fuel filler cap as well. It tends to rust around here where water tends to sit. Coming up to the back, you're just checking all the body panels for any rust. So inside the boot, so these tail light seals like to leak water into the boot. So what you want to do is lift up your boot carpet. And just check underneath to make sure there's no sitting water, which luckily there's not on this. A common problem on Mark III's as well is the scuttle panel rubber loves to break off, and what that does is just leaks water down into your scuttle panel. You want to make sure that the turret is all okay. As we've learnt in the VR swap, this near side turret was actually split all the way around due to rust.
What? Are you sure we want to go any further?
Why? This whole turret is split.
That whole turret's split.
So make sure you check both turrets. On these 2-litre 8-valve engines, which is basically the GTI, these breather hoses like to split, which this one is, as you can see here. So you can actually buy replacement pipes off eBay. If you rock your gear stick forward and back, and you've got this spaghetti kind of wobbly feel, that's this bush down here. It's difficult to see, but it's this little ball here. And what that does is when you're changing up and down, this is your movement. There's like a plastic ball that goes around this that actually melts because the exhaust is right here. So make sure you check for that. These linkages are made out of plastic and they tend to break off and wobble around, so check that as well. Coolant flange here, which as you can see on mine is leaking because of all the coolant. Crank sensors. Now it's not every Mark III and it's not every engine, but a rule of thumb, usually if your car struggles to start after it gets hot, I'd look underneath of the car, which on this car the crank sensor is just there, just goes behind the oil filter housing. And what it does is the plastic here, it tends to crumble away. It exposes a load of wires, and then wires touch together, which shorts them out, and the car just cuts the fuel. You can't actually start the car. So it's definitely worth checking that out, because I had the exact same problem on this car. Another problem on these cars are window regulators, which is basically what operates your electric window, makes it go up and down. It would have either failed for 2 reasons. One reason is there's a plastic housing that holds the cable that makes it go up and down, and the second one is the cable which actually moves it up and down, that can snap. It's very common on Mark III Golfs. So if you're having that issue where it's not going up or down, or it's making really weird noises when it goes up and down, most likely is your window regulator. So another common thing is this seal. So when you pull the sunroof all the way back, there are actually drain tubes on each side of the car, and they tend to block up, which leaks water into your car, makes all your headliner sag. People tend to say the sunroofs are at fault, but I would check the free stuff first. So first thing you want to do is just leak a bit of water into your drain tubes, and you should get water leak out of this little bung here. As you can see, mine's caked up with dirt, which is probably why mine's leaking as well. These checks you would do on every car, you know. I wouldn't just say just do this if you only have a Mark III Golf. It's worth checking every single car. I would just pay more attention to the areas that I've mentioned, just because they're just so common on these cars. The bottom of the arches, down the sills, they're so common for Mark III Golfs, and it's worth just paying a bit more attention. Obviously I'd recommend taking a mechanic with you and checking over everything, making sure the engine is okay, there's no crazy noises, checking there's no oil leaks, no coolant leaks, there's no lights on the dash. These also suffer with ABS faults, and what people tend to do is just pull the light out. So make sure that when you switch the ignition on, the ABS light comes on as well. I can't demonstrate it with this car because it doesn't have it, but just to give you an idea, it's just right here. So when you turn the ignition on, this should light up with the airbag light. If it doesn't, they've disconnected it. These are just brief checks that you can do. I've not gone over the entire car with a magnifying glass because a lot of it is just common sense. These are just the common places that you can find on a Mark III Golf. I would say if you are looking to buy one, have some money. Oh, another thing, headliners. They always sag. That doesn't necessarily mean it's got a leak. Obviously, as you can imagine, these cars are over 20 years old now, so the glue's deteriorated and the foam's broken down. So it's definitely worth checking the headliners, you know, not been bodged up and stuff. If it has, come and see Project 7. We wrap them all day, cheap prices. So generally speaking, with the bodywork, look everywhere. Don't just look in the places I've said. Like I said, this is just a brief guide and just giving you guys an idea of what to look at when you are buying one, or just some checks you can check on yourself. This is just a brief guide. I would recommend, if you are buying a car, take a mechanic with you, or take someone who knows their Mark IIIs, just because there is a lot of things that you should check really when buying a car, especially a car of this age, because people tend not to look after them. And you find that this one, I mean, I got this really cheap and it needs a little bit of welding here and there, but it's just the little things that add up. So the coolant leak, my crank sensor was going, the headliner was completely destroyed on it. Just little checks that you can do just to save you a bit of cash, so you don't even have to take it to a mechanic. Coil packs, you'll probably hear most Mark III owners say it. Coil packs are known to go on these as well, which is this one here. There are replacements which people tend to put polo ones on, which I haven't used myself, so I can't really say if they're better or not, but do keep a spare in your car. I mean, they're about 20 quid, 30 quid, so it's definitely worth getting hold of some. At the same time, I'd probably recommend upgrading your HT leads and buying some spark plugs for this car as well, just because if you are changing your spark plugs, it is likely that you might pull on this a bit too much and rip the inside of the lead out. So for the sake of 20 quid or so, save yourself some cash. These look like they've actually been replaced because they're not got any Volkswagen markings on. So if your car has aircon, this is your aircon compressor here. It's just worth checking all the lines to make sure there's no leaks. So you can see there's a bit of residue there, but mine actually works, so I think mine's okay. It's just worth running the lines just to make sure there's no liquid or anything coming out. When diagnosing an aircon fault as well, you want to make sure that your compressor is kicking in. So to switch your car on and press the aircon, you should notice that your revs drop down a bit, just because the extra drain on the engine. If it doesn't, then your compressor's not kicking in. If you can't hear it, it's worth just getting someone else with some airs just to come out and check it, just because you don't want to go through regassing the whole system, replacing the pipes and the condenser and finding out it's the compressor. So just a guide, just to save you a bit more cash. So another problem that this stuff with is glove boxes. That handle will snap off, and inside there's a catch that tends to snap. You can actually buy a replacement handle without the lock, so what you do is you just remove the lock, put it on your new one, and that's all good. I've seemed to have got every single common fault possible on this car. But it is what it is anyway. Guys, do your proper checks, and if you do have a Mark III yourself, it's worth going over all this stuff yourself. If you do have skirts and arches, there's no real way of telling unless you take them all off, but you can feel underneath at the back there will be a lot of dirt, so you want to clean all that off first. But if it tends to feel really brittle and weak, chances are they're rotten out, but there's no proper way of telling, like I said, unless you strip it all down. So if you found this video useful, make sure you like, share, comment and subscribe, and happy buying cars. Peace.
Bye.